Imagine, sitting in gridlock, you sneeze, and suddenly a SWAT team rips you out of your car and charges you with causing the citywide traffic jam.
I mean, yeah, it sounds completely absurd.
It does. But, today we're actually looking at a real legal case where a man was sent to prison for exactly this kind of impossible physics.
It really is wild. We're diving into a stack of, frankly, fascinating sources today. We've got court documents, a formal legal appeal, a blood letter written from inside a Chinese prison, and even these highly technical analyses that use advanced AI models to break down the hard science of the case.
And the mission of this deep dive is to explore how disciplines like statistical physics and network theory can actually be weaponized to just completely dismantle a legal argument about cause and effect.
Right, because it's this remarkable collision of two completely different worlds. We're watching what happens when the mechanisms of the law, which, let's be honest, can sometimes be subjective or arbitrary, just run headfirst into the immutable laws of thermodynamics.
Yeah, exactly. But before we go any further, I need to make a quick note for you, the listener. The sources we are looking at today involve politically charged content.
Yeah, that includes references to the Chinese political system, President Xi Jinping, Donald Trump, and communism.
Right. And we are strictly impartial. We are not endorsing any political views, taking any sides, or validating any of the political statements made in these documents. We are simply unpacking the fascinating scientific and legal arguments contained in the source material.
Perfectly said.
Okay, let's unpack this. Who is the person at the center of this collision?
So the subject of these sources is Dr. Chen Jingyuan. He is a 48-year-old scholar, and his specific area of expertise is nonlinear complex systems.
Okay, art science guy.
Exactly. But his story takes this severe turn when a squad of police literally breaks down the door of his home in Kunming, China, to arrest him.
And looking at the evidence the authorities cited, the crime just feels, entirely disproportionate to a SWAT-style raid.
Oh, completely.
He used Twitter, which he accessed via a VPN, to sporadically retweet political cartoons and articles.
Yeah, just retweets. The text specifies a few of these posts. There's a cartoon of a Hong Kong umbrella girl, a caricature of President Xi Jinping kneeling to Donald Trump, and a video of a speech by Trump criticizing communism.
So for that, he gets raided.
Right, and those retweets resulted in Dr. Chen being charged with picking quarrels and provoking trouble.
Which sounds incredibly vague.
It is. The legal analysis in the sources describes this as a pocket crime. It's essentially a catch-all charge used by prosecutors when, a specific statutory law hasn't necessarily been broken, but the authorities just want to penalize the behavior anyway.
I see.
The prosecution's core argument was that his retweets constituted rumors that caused a severe disorder of public order. And for that, he was sentenced to 1 year and 8 months in prison.
Okay, well, the prosecution's narrative has this glaring factual hole that just leaps right off the page of these sources.
Yeah, the numbers.
Right. Dr. Chen's Twitter account had fewer than 100 followers. Furthermore, the analysis points out that most of those followers were zombies, meaning inactive bot accounts.
Yeah, they weren't even real people.
Exactly. He had almost zero interaction on his posts. And over the course of 20 years on the platform, he had retweeted less than 100 times total.
It's just basically nothing.
Right. They're basically blaming a drop of water for a flood. So how does Dr. Chen actually counter that mathematically?
Well, he points out a massive category mistake. The prosecution confused a fluctuation with a phase transition.
Okay, wait. Break those terms down for us.
Sure. So to understand why his defense is so brilliant, we have to look at how statistical physics defines a system. Any system made up of a massive number of free elements, whether that's, molecules of air in a room or millions of users on a social media platform, it's never perfectly still.
Right. There's always movement.
Exactly. There's a constant, unavoidable background noise. That micro-perturbation is a fluctuation. And Dr. Chen argues his retweet was merely a fluctuation.
But the court isn't prosecuting him for a fluctuation.
Mm-hmm.
They are prosecuting him for the severe disorder of public order, which is, I assume, the phase transition.
That is the crux of it, yeah.
Yeah.
A phase transition is a macro-level systemic shift. So think of water suddenly boiling, or a piece of metal becoming magnetized.
Okay.
The prosecution essentially claimed that society boiling over into public disorder was directly caused by Dr. Chen's tiny fluctuation of a retweet.
But you can't just assert that, right? You can't just say a single molecule vibrating slightly faster caused the entire pot of water to boil. There has to be some physical mechanism connecting the micro event to the macro outcome.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, statistical physics tells us that a fluctuation cannot cause a phase transition unless the entire system is already pushed to a critical state.
A critical state.
Yeah, a single extra degree of heat doesn't boil water if the water is at room temperature. The energy just dissipates. But if the entire pot of water is already sitting at 99.9 degrees Celsius, that is a critical state.
Ah, I get it. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
It feels like someone blaming a single air molecule's random movement for causing a city-destroying typhoon. It just fundamentally ignores how energy scales up.
It completely ignores it.
But, I can hear people playing devil's advocate right now, thinking about the butterfly effect.
Oh.
Because popular culture tells us that the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil can set off a tornado in Texas. So couldn't his one tiny tweet be the flap of the butterfly wings that eventually cascades into this societal hurricane?
Well, it's a fair question, and the sources actually address the butterfly effect directly because it is just so widely misunderstood in popular culture.
How so?
The mathematical reality is that the butterfly effect does not mean any small event causes a massive outcome. It only functions in a system that exhibits self-organized criticality.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning the system has to already be in a highly sensitive supercritical state where all the damping mechanisms have essentially failed. If a system is stable, the physics dictate that 99.9999% of disturbances just die out instantly.
Right. The wings flap, the air moves an inch, and it dissipates.
Exactly.
The sources outline this series of hard science analogies to demonstrate why the prosecution's logic fails across multiple disciplines. And they are brilliant.
They really are.
Like in thermodynamics, they compare the prosecution's argument to dropping a cup of warm water into the ocean and then holding the person with the cup legally responsible for causing a tsunami.
Right, because the mechanics of thermodynamics make that impossible due to heat dissipation.
Yeah.
The ocean acts as an infinite heat sink. So the thermal energy of that single cup of water diffuses and reaches equilibrium almost instantly. There is literally no physical mechanism for that trace amount of thermal energy to organize itself into a macro-level kinetic wave.
It's just absorbed. And they apply it to electromagnetism, too.
Oh, the wire analogy.
Yeah. Finding one single electron twitching in a copper wire and blaming that isolated twitch for the catastrophic collapse of the national power grid.
Which is mathematically absurd. In that scenario, an electron moving in a wire encounters resistance. As it hits other atoms, its kinetic energy is just lost as trace heats.
So it never even reaches the grid.
Exactly. It never reaches the broader grid because the grounding and resistance of the physical material just bleed the energy away. The energy scales are so entirely divorced from one another that a causal link isn't just unlikely, it violates the physical laws of the universe.
Wait, there's the astrophysics one, too.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's like a single grain of sand altering the gravitational structure of the Milky Way, or a particle falling into a black hole causing a supernova outside the event horizon.
Those physical systems illustrate the absurdity beautifully.
They do, but, Dr. Chen isn't dealing with ocean currents or copper wires or black holes. He is dealing with an information network.
Right, a social media platform.
So how does he translate an electron hitting resistance into a tweet failing to go viral?
Well, this is where he brings in his specific expertise, which is network theory.
Okay.
The sources detail a mathematical model called the Galton-Watson branching process.
The Galton-Watson branching process.
Yes. In network science, for information to cascade, for a post to truly go viral, the average branching number, which is represented by the Greek letter mu, it must be greater than 1.
Okay, meaning that if I share a piece of information, the structural mathematics of the network dictate that, on average, more than one person will see it and reshare it.
Precisely. That is the only way you achieve exponential growth. If your mu is 2, you share it with 2 people, they share it with 4, then 8, and the cascade begins.
Right.
But if your mu is below 1, say it's before 5, the transmission simply decays. You share it, maybe half the people pass it on, and within just a few generations, the transmission mathematically drops to 0.
Wow.
And the sources establish that Dr. Chen was an edge node. He was out on the extreme disconnected fringes of the network topology.
Because of the zombies and low follower count.
Exactly. His mon was mathematically close to 0.
So it's literally like trying to start a forest fire by striking a match, but you're standing on a concrete island in the middle of a lake.
I love that analogy.
Right. I mean, it doesn't matter how hot the match burns, the physical topology of your environment makes the transmission of that fire impossible.
And the sources cite Cohen's critical threshold to prove exactly that.
Cohen's critical threshold.
Yeah. It's a mathematical proof demonstrating that any information originating from an edge node like Dr. Chen's account hits a topological wall immediately. The transmission doesn't just slowly fade, it dies out exponentially. The network architecture itself acts as your concrete island.
And the astrophysics analogy in the text actually calls this an event horizon.
Oh, that's right.
Dr. Chen's account was trapped inside an information event horizon. The structural parameters of the social media platform blocked his actions from ever affecting the macro world.
The causal path was just completely severed by the architecture of the network. There was no physical or mathematical way for the information to bridge the gap between his isolated node and the broader public square.
Okay, so his network mu is 0. The physics prove his tweet is mathematically trapped. But courts do not operate on statistical physics or network topology, right? They operate on the law.
Right, unfortunately for him.
So how did Dr. Chen force a judge to care about Cohen's critical threshold?
Well, this raises an important question. How does physics dictate legal causality? He bridges the physics to the law through the concept of objective imputation.
Objective imputation.
Yes. In criminal law, objective imputation dictates that you can only hold someone responsible for an outcome if they created a legally impermissible risk that actually materializes into the specific harm.
Okay, meaning the risk can't just be theoretical. There has to be an actual chain of events connecting the defendant's action to the final damage.
Exactly. And because the physical and mathematical parameters prove Dr. Chen's tweet could not travel because it hit that topological wall, the risk could not materialize into anything.
He was stopped in his tracks.
The transmission path was mathematically non-existent, and without a path of transmission, the legal chain of causality is broken at the molecular level.
So you cannot be legally responsible for a building burning down if physics proves your spark never left your pocket.
Exactly.
That is wild. But, the court's argument didn't just ignore the physics of how information travels. They also made some staggering assumptions about his state of mind, his mens rea.
Oh, the intent argument.
Yeah. The judge argued that because Dr. Chen is highly educated and holds a PhD, he, quote, should have known that the posts he retweeted were false rumors.
It is a massive epistemological leap for a court to mandate what a citizen must know as absolute truth.
Right.
And Dr. Chen addresses this in his prison letter, turning a basic criminal defense into just a profound philosophical takedown.
It's brilliant.
He draws heavily on Gödel's incompleteness theorem and the theories of Karl Popper, a prominent philosopher of science, specifically regarding falsifiability.
Wait, hold on. Dr. Chen is actually bringing mathematical logic proofs into a criminal defense.
Yes.
He is taking the proof that no system can be perfectly complete and aiming it right at the legal definition of truth. So how does he map Gödel onto his intent to spread a rumor?
Well, Gödel proved mathematically that any complex logical system cannot be both complete and perfectly consistent at the same time. There will always be true statements that cannot be proven within the parameters of that system.
Right. The system is inherently limited.
Exactly. So Dr. Chen takes that mathematical reality and applies it to human cognition. If strict formal mathematics cannot be complete and consistent, demanding that a human mind possess an absolute, infallible understanding of the truth of a political caricature is just absurd.
And Karl Popper's theory of falsifiability adds another layer to that, doesn't it?
It does.
Because science doesn't advance by proving things absolutely true forever. It advances by putting forth hypotheses and trying to prove them false.
Precisely. Dr. Chen argues that as a true scholar, he is acutely aware that human cognition is inherently limited. He views the world through a lens of skepticism and open inquiry.
Makes sense for a scientist.
Right. Our grasp on reality consists of provisional truths that we hold until they are disproven. Therefore, retweeting a cartoon or an opinion isn't the malicious spread of a known falsehood. It is participation in the ongoing, messy process of exploring reality.
So he is basically telling the court, I have a PhD, which is precisely why I know that I do not have a monopoly on absolute truth.
Exactly.
The more educated you become, the more you realize the boundaries of your own knowledge. Criminalizing the act of sharing an idea simply because it wasn't pre-verified as an absolute objective reality fundamentally misunderstands how human knowledge is generated.
The court assumes the existence of a single, easily identifiable objective truth and presumes Dr. Chen willfully chose to ignore it. But as a scholar who studies nonlinear complex systems, Dr. Chen knows that reality is highly nuanced. It's chaotic, and it's resistant to simplistic categorizations of absolute true or absolute false.
Wow. So if we follow Dr. Chen's math and physics to their logical conclusion, he mathematically could not have caused this societal avalanche.
No, impossible.
His information was trapped behind an event horizon, and he lacked the epistemological certainty required for criminal intent.
Right.
So what does this all mean? If he didn't do it, who actually caused the instability the court was so afraid of?
Well, Dr. Chen points out a deeply uncomfortable structural reality for the authorities. In network theory, when you observe massive instability or a phase transition in a complex system, you don't look at the isolated edge nodes.
You don't look at the guy with 100 followers.
Exactly. You look at the supernodes.
Supernodes.
The entities that possess massive power, reach, and structural influence over the entire network. Dr. Chen warns that the real threat to the stability of the system is not the background noise of ordinary citizens occasionally tweeting.
Because the background noise is just a fluctuation. It's just the air molecules moving.
The actual threat is a corrupt judicial system that violates its own legal frameworks.
Wow.
When authorities act arbitrarily, breaking their own laws to persecute a citizen, they become a destructive supernode. Their disproportionate actions are what actually degrade the structural integrity of society. They are projecting the consequences of their own systemic failures onto a powerless individual.
The authorities themselves are the ones applying the heat, pushing the entire system toward that critical, unstable state.
Precisely.
This analysis gives you an entirely new framework for looking at causality. I mean, in our daily lives, we are constantly bombarded with narratives asserting that X caused Y.
Oh, all the time.
You hear, this one specific policy caused the entire economic downturn, or this one bad email ruined a massive corporate project.
And we gravitate toward those simple, linear narratives because human nature desires a clear villain or a clear hero. We want causality to be a straight line.
But Dr. Chen's defense empowers you to look for the control parameters. Before you accept that a micro-event caused a macro disaster, ask yourself, was the system already at a critical state?
Right.
Was there an actual verifiable path of transmission, a mu greater than 1? Or is someone just confusing random background noise with a phase transition?
It serves as such a vital tool for critical thinking in an era of information overload. And it actually leaves us with a profound, almost paradoxical thought to consider, drawn directly from the science of complex systems in these sources.
Let's hear it.
The physics dictate that in any complex system, whether it is the Earth's atmosphere, a digital network, or a human society, fluctuations like local noise, dissenting opinions, and minor disorder are natural, unavoidable features of existence.
They are the background radiation of reality.
Exactly. So if a legal or social system attempts to violently eradicate all microfluctuations by treating every single one as a catastrophic phase transition, does that rigid paranoid suppression actually force the entire system into the very critical, unstable state it is desperately trying to avoid?